Hello, everyone. I just wanted to take a couple minutes to talk today about the crisis that is going on at the Ukrainian-Russian border because a lot of people here in Miami, some news organizations are asking me what's going on, what are the risks involved. So I just want to give you a quick, fast explanation of what's going on right now and what might happen in the near future about this. So, why is Russia right now so upset? And why is threatening with a possible invasion of Ukraine? Um, I understand that Russia have perhaps 100,000 or a little bit more than 100,000 soldiers deployed already surrounding Ukraine and is threatening with invading it. So we need to understand something. First is ideology. Okay, for most Russian nationalists like Putin is, I mean, for most of the conservative nationalist movement in Russia, Ukraine is part of Russia. It's the same country. It's like it's the same people and the same country. When we talk about Ukraine, we are not talking about the the country that we know with that name, with the current borders. The Ukraine that exists today, that is product of the Second World War, is kind of what we can call a Frankenstein kind of country, if you want to call it that way. But at least it's a very artificially created country. The original Ukraine is what we call, the historians call the Kievian Rus. The Kievian Rus, I mean, and we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of years ago. We're talking about Saint Vladimir the Great, the the prince that converted into Christianism and converted the Rus people into Christianism. And I mean, and he later on, after the Mongols came and left, etc., they gave they gave birth to what we call the cradle of the Russian people. So that Kievan Rus is something completely different of what we call today Ukraine. What we call today Ukraine is the addition and the mutation of borders, especially after First World War and especially after Second World War, taking parts of different empires that were being dissolved, like the Austro-Hungary Empire, taking parts of Austro-Hungary, taking parts of Poland, and then combining it into this country called Ukraine. But the original Ukraine, what the Russians, like Putin, think, the original Kievian Rus is completely different from this artificially created new Ukraine that took parts and parts and parts and created this country as we understand it today. That's why the divide in Ukraine. That's why we have this big divide between the eastern part and the western part of the country. The western part of the country, we're talking about really Polish people. We're talking about people that came from that Austro-Hungary Empire. People that actually have no attachment to Russia, no attachment to the Kievian Rus, not attaching to the Russian people. They don't speak Russian, they don't feel Russian, and that's the big divide between that people on the western part of Ukraine, of today's Ukraine, and the eastern part of Ukraine. The eastern part of Ukraine is pro-Russian. The eastern part of Ukraine is people that mostly, I mean not all obviously, but mostly consider themselves Russians, and they speak Russian, and they have Russia to them is part of their own country, or at least their motherland or their fatherland is Russia. So that's why we have this big divide. I mean, a complete divide, a passionate divide between Ukrainian from the east and Ukrainian from the west. That's in a nutshell. I mean, I'm oversimplifying here, but that's basically what we have in this situation between those two different kind of people that are inside of the same country called Ukraine with the current modern borders. But we need to understand also that other than ideology, that Putin perhaps sees Ukraine, and he's said many times, like part of his own country, like one country. There is also the military implications. That is the trigger. It's not the ideological one so much, but the actual hot trigger of this action is the military component. NATO have been expanding and expanding and expanding and expanding to the east more and more and more for the last 25 years. And the what we can call buffer countries or neutral countries have been reduced. So right now we have a situation because of NATO expansion where US troops, offensive troops, tanks, where United Kingdom troops, German troops, Italian troops, Spanish troops, Belgian troops, and etc., etc. Those, all the armies that made NATO are getting closer and closer and closer and closer. Have been getting closer to the Russian border for the last 25 years. So Russia feels absolutely, completely uncomfortable about this. They see this as a threat to their national security and furthermore to their survival. And I'm going to explain myself. Right now, the situation is that because the buffer states have almost disappeared, we have basically Poland and we have the Baltic countries, also member of NATO, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. We have even Romania, and we have all this eastern expansion. And we see that there is almost no buffer. There is no division, geographical division between the armies of NATO. And when I say NATO, I mean the United States and United Kingdom, the big military powers, okay? And getting very close to the Russian border, to the Russian land. So we have, and again, I'm going to oversimplify to make this easy to understand. But what we have, the situation is that we have a buffer in the north. The north has a buffer. And that buffer is Finland. Finland, they have a very, very, very long border with Russia, is neutral. Is not member of NATO. I mean, they send their officers for training, and they say all the time, we love NATO, and please, let's go to do an exercise together here and there, but it's not member of NATO, period. Finland is not member of NATO, is not protected by Article 5, the self-defense. An attack in one is an attack on all of us. It's not protected by that article, and most important, cannot bring in thousands and thousands and thousands of troops from the United States or the United Kingdom with offensive weapons to its territory right now. It's neutral, okay? So that means that Russia has a buffer in the north. And that's very important for Russia because remember, in the north is St. Petersburg, a very key, very important, large city, okay, that Russia cannot reach at all. So remember the Second World War, it was one of the main efforts of Germany to take St. Petersburg, at that time Leningrad. So that's very important for Russia to have that buffer over there, to have that protection in the north. So it has a buffer in the north with Finland. In the center, Russia also has a buffer, a kind of buffer, because Belarus is there. Belarus, even though it's under the influence and they have a joint military that shares exercises and common defense with Russia, Belarus is not Russia as such, is not proper Russia, and is the buffer that Russia has between its territory and Poland and Germany, etc. So it's a buffer. So it acts like that buffer that Russia really, really needs, really wants for its national defense, for its national survival. And the borders of Russia with the Baltic countries are very small, are really not that big. I mean, not even not with Russia proper, not with Kaliningrad, that is this Russian territory that is surrounded by NATO countries, and obviously with a border with Belarus. But they are not that important to Russia, that border that the Baltic might have with Russia itself. Now we go to the south. So Russia has its buffer in the north with Finland. It has its buffer in the center with Belarus. Now in the south, Ukraine is the buffer. Ukraine is the buffer that Russia has and that Russia needs, according to its national strategy, to its national defense strategy. Russia needs the Ukraine to be neutral, to be not part of NATO, to be a country that doesn't give to Russia any threat, that cannot invade Russia, that cannot take Russian territory. So that has been until now the situation. I don't know exactly what triggered this. Perhaps some intelligence, perhaps some rumors, perhaps some underground negotiations or diplomacy that Russia got aware of. I don't know. But something triggered Russia. Okay, Ukraine might stop being a neutral country. Ukraine might stop being the buffer that we need for our survival. Ukraine might become part of NATO. And that is a red line, period. That is a super red line that Russia cannot afford because of their national defense strategy and because of their own national survival. Russia cannot afford that. We need to understand that if Ukraine becomes part of NATO, then thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of troops from the United States, from the United Kingdom, from Germany, from Italy, from wherever, can go into Ukraine and can be a few kilometers, a few miles away from the Russian border. That Russia sees that as a complete threat to their survival. Russia has in Crimea, Sebastopol, an extremely important, critical naval operations over there in that base, the base of Sevastopol. They see that troops in Ukraine, I mean American troops, British troops, German troops in Ukraine can put in mortal danger of destruction their base in Sebastopol. So Russia cannot, from the viewpoint they see the war, with the eyes they see the war, they cannot tolerate. There is no way they can tolerate US, UK, British, German, Italian troops in Ukraine, because that will put their super important, key important, critical naval base, Russian Navy base of Sebastopol in danger. Furthermore, Ukraine, the border of Ukraine proper with Russia is an open way, is an open path to the south of Russia, and exactly to where the Russian heart, economical, industrial, energy heart is located. That's where the oil of the Caucasus is. Volgograd. Remember, Volgograd is Stalingrad. It's the old Stalingrad from the Second World War, one of the most decisive, brutal, savage battles of the Second World War. Germany tried with von Paulus, with the Sixth Army, with 300,000 men, to take at all costs Volgograd, because Germany knew that the oil of Russia is located in that area. From 1942, from the fall of 1942 until March of 1943, there was a brutal, savage battle, the Battle of Stalingrad, and it was a complete and total effort of Germany trying to take the area of the Caucasus, of Volgograd, because that is the heart, the industrial heart, the energy heart of Russia. So it's a vital interest of Russia to defend and to keep that area protected, to keep it free, far and far and far away from enemy troops, far and far away from the sites of enemy troops. Putting Ukraine into NATO means that thousands and thousands and thousands of British, American, Italian, German troops, Polish troops can go into the Ukraine and can put the industrial heart, the Caucasus, Volgograd, Vladikavkaz, all the Caucasus area under mortal danger. So if Ukraine becomes member of NATO, Russia completely lost it. I mean, they completely lost their buffer in the south. So therefore they have no buffer in the south, and that is something that Putin can never ever accept. That they see that as a mortal threat. They see that, let's suppose for a second that the city of San Antonio, Texas. The city of San Antonio, Texas is the critical industrial heart of the United States. San Antonio, Texas is the energy heart of the United States, where all the oil and all the gas is and all the heavy industries. And let's suppose that is the most important base, naval base of the United States is located near the San Antonio. I mean, hypothetically, let's gonna think hypothetically. The naval base of the most important base of the United States is near San Antonio, Texas. And now let's suppose that there is a real possibility that Russia may deploy 50,000 soldiers with offensive weapons in the border of Texas and Mexico. In the border of Mexico near San Antonio, Texas. A few hours. I mean, 6 hours from San Antonio, Texas. That will be a red line that the United States will never, ever, under no circumstance, will accept. Now, let's gonna flip the coin. That's how Putin sees right now the Ukrainian situation. They see themselves that their heart, their economic, industrial, and their energy heart in the Caucasus, in Volgograd, is under threat. They see themselves that the Sebastopol base is under threat. Because if, for whatever reason, Ukraine becomes part of NATO, Ukraine is going to be full of foreign troops with offensive capabilities that can military take possession of Sebastopol, of Volgograd, in matter of days. And that is something that Russia cannot accept. That's a red line that Russia cannot accept. So that is the military context. That's why Russia is willing to go to war with Ukraine and take Ukraine and invade Ukraine. What will happen? Okay, number one, the United States is not going to fight. We are not going to fight. We will not go over there and defend Ukraine in a military way. That cannot happen. It will not happen. Ukraine is not a member of NATO. We don't have an obligation to do that. No sane country in the world wants to do that. No sane country in the world wants to go to war with Russia right now. Russia, even though it's very weak in the economical level, is still a military superpower, a nuclear superpower. You have thousands and thousands of nuclear weapons. You have hypersonic gliders. You have the capabilities to destroy the world I don't know how many times. So for the pragmatic countries, just like Germany or like France, listen, nobody wants to go to a nuclear holocaust war with Russia in order to defend a country that is not part of NATO, there is no legal obligation to defend. Okay, nobody wants to destroy the world just to defend Ukraine. So no, we are not going to war with Russia. That's number one. What will happen, or what might happen, if Russia really invades? They are going to devastate the Russian economy. That is what is going to happen. The United States and Europe, they are going to get together and they are going to punish Russia in a very terrible way. I mean, it might be terrible for the Russian economy. They might be kicked out of the SWIFT, the international bank transaction system, to do monetary transactions and wire transfers, etc. So they might be kicked out of there. That's number one. Number two, all the gas that comes from Russia to Germany mostly, they will persuade Germany some way somehow to stop that gas from coming from Russia, and they will maybe supply Germany with some other kind of gas from other countries, from liquid gas perhaps, but they will try to stop oil and gas as far as they can, obviously. Or they are not going to kill themselves; they shoot themselves in the foot. But they are going to try to stop the flow of gas and oil from Russia into Germany and into other countries of Europe to punish the Russian economy. And obviously, there are going to be a lot of diplomatics expelled, and there is going to be a lot of sanctions, individual sanctions to individuals, and they're going to confiscate property of Russia and bank accounts of Russia here and there, etc. It's going to be terrible for the Russian economy if Russia invades. So if it's going to be so painful and so terrible for the Russian economy to invade Ukraine, why is Russia even doing? Listen, again, because Russia is right now in an impossible decision. I mean, they're in the face of an impossible decision. Should I kill myself or should I just cut my arm? That's it. To Russia, the sanctions, as terrible as they are, as hard as they are, as strong as that might be, the SWIFT and the oil and the gas, is, I'm going to amputate my arm. That's it. But if I let Ukraine to become part of NATO, and I led Ukraine to station 50,000 British and American and German and Polish troops there, that's not amputation of an arm, that's a harakiri. I'm killing myself, because that is placing in terrible danger, critical danger, their national security and the survival of the Russian state. Russia cannot survive without Sebastopol, without the energy, without the oil of Volgograd and the Caucasus and Vladikavkaz, the area. They cannot survive with that. So Russia is in an impossible, right now, into an impossible situation. Should I cut my arm, amputate my arm with the sanctions that are coming, or should I just do the harakiri and kill myself and let Ukraine be part of NATO and let thousands of British and American and German troops stationed over there? That is the situation. That is what might happen right now. I think, sadly, terrible. This is sad, because this is not going to be good for anyone but for China. Again, this is not going to benefit anyone but China. China is going to be the winner. China is going to say, okay, this is great, let them fight. I'm going to keep getting stronger. I'm going to be in my goal to become the #1 superpower of the world. Let the other guys kill themselves and spend their resources and whatever. I just want to be the #1. I want to be the stronger one. I'm going to look from the distance, take a look at all these disasters from the distance and enjoy and be the victorious one of this situation. But it's going to be terrible for everyone. What I really think that if there is not a guarantee, even a secret guarantee, that it doesn't have to be published. I mean, the United States and Britain, and they want to save face. They want to save face in front of the press, in front of the international media. And even though they are not going to say it publicly, they might say, oh, Ukraine they are sovereign nation. They have to do whatever they think they want to do. Sovereign nations have to be independent, and they have free will, blah, 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 blah. Even though they might say that publicly, to save face in the public opinion, secretly, maybe, perhaps, who knows, maybe secretly, they might give some guarantees to Russia. Listen, guys, we will not allow Ukraine, never, ever, to be member of NATO. You have our guarantee, cross our heart, blah, 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 blah. So if Russia receives some kind of guarantee, even secret ones, then this might de-escalate. But if Russia doesn't receive any guarantees that Ukraine will not be part of NATO, I think that sadly, very, very sadly, we might see military action in Ukraine. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. This is Ron Aledo from Miami. Thank you.